the haunted rent-a-room. The legacy of World War II atrocities. This incident occurred in the late 70s in a rented room. It was rumored to be a torture chamber during the Japanese occupation in World War II in Southeast Asia. The room was reportedly so haunted that during certain hours of the day, countless of paranormal activities took place there. Although not a form of paranormal, the girls involved had all reportedly experienced sleepwalking, all within the same night. That morning, 5 girls would wake up to something they would remember for the rest of their lives, and a haunting story to tell. So what actually happened? It was clear that something disturbing had taken place last night, something impossible to explain. At first, before coming, they had heard of a rumor that one of the rooms above the many shop houses in the city center was extremely haunted. They did not know which one it was, or that if it was even true. Maybe if it were only one person who had sleepwalked and woke up in a different spot as she had slept in, they would all be teasing her that morning, albeit a serious matter. Instead, for all 5 of the girls with no history of sleepwalking to find themselves waking up on different mattresses, it sounded like something out of a horror movie. When they realized what had happened, even the girls who did not believe in ghosts and the afterlife or anything paranormal for that matter, were starting to believe in the possibilities. Yesterday, when all 5 girls had arrived in town for a new chapter in their lives, they were going to spend their first night in that room, before moving into the all-girls dormitory in college. They had arranged for a 2-night stay there, as they had planned to arrive earlier, to explore the town, where they were going to spend 3 years of their lives, attending the one and only teacher training college in the state at that time. The room was big, with no partition, enough to accommodate around 7 people. There were no need for bunk beds either, as it was normal to sleep on thin mattresses on the floor, when space was ample and life was scarcer and simpler back then, in the late 70s. The room was on the upper level of a 2-story terrace shop house, built in the 1930s and had withstood the Japanese occupation more than 4 decades ago. It was a prime location situated at the city center, easily accessible by public transportation. Coupled by the cheap rent, it was hard for students to resist, and that was how the 5 girls had ended up staying there for the next 2 nights. All 5 girls were from the same high school and had been accepted into the much sought-after teacher training program in the country at that time. They had boarded the bus around midnight from the smaller town where they had come from the night before, and the journey had taken around 10 hours. Therefore, by the time they had reached, it was almost in the afternoon. It was not hard to find a place. The owners of the place were middle-aged husband and wife, who ran a small flour milling business right below the room. The staircase leading to the upper floor was narrow, but clean and well lit. Nothing had seemed suspicious at all that day. When they had entered the room, they could see, near the entrance, a single sink for everyone to share, and a spacious shower room with attached toilet at the corner. On the floor, there was a pile of thin mattresses, stacked on top of each other at the bottom, with pillows and blankets placed at the top. The room was at the back of the building, and the view from the window was not so flattering. Just an undeveloped piece of land with some trees, which could look serene during the day, but perhaps a bit spooky when it was pitch black at night. They were satisfied with the room when they saw it, as it was affordable, clean, inconvenient. In fact, a senior from high school had introduced the room to the bunch of girls. She had enrolled in the same teacher training college the year before with several other girls, also from the same high school. She had kept in contact with some of the junior girls and mentioned that she had stayed there the previous year. This was how the conversation had started.
So how many of you are coming? There were 2 of us last year, but 4 other girls were from a different school. Since we knew them, we invited them to share a rented room together above one of the shop houses. You know, it's quite hard to find a shared room in town. Most of the places would only allow 3 people per room, and it would cost double the price. Since you girls are tight on budget and it's only for 2 nights, I would recommend staying there.
Everything had sounded fine and ensuring until she added an unsettling detail.
I will give you the phone number of the owner so you can make the arrangement yourself. But I don't think there will be any problem with vacancy.
Not missing the suspicious tone, the junior then asked.
It sounds like a good deal, so how could you be so sure that it would be vacant? Since the orientation for the teacher training college is just around the corner, and people would start coming into town, surely they would need a place to stay, right?
This time, the senior sounded a bit more concerned, as if remembering something. She answered.
There's a rumor that one of the rooms above the many shop houses in the vicinity used to be a torture room during the Japanese occupation. I don't know how true it is, so I did not want to say any of this, but since you asked, I am telling you now. We stayed there last year, but only for a night, and honestly, we did hear some strange noises late into the night. And the tap water had a bit of a malfunction. But maybe it's because it's an old building, you know. The piping is old, the ventilation is old, and there's a flour milling place downstairs with machineries. Maybe the owners managed to get some of the things fixed since then. I mean, it's entirely up to you girls. If you believe in ghosts and things like that, then it's better to avoid.
After hanging up, the 5 girls had discussed and unanimously decided to make some calls to arrange for an alternative place to stay. However, luck was not on their side, and as the senior had mentioned, all of the rooms would cost double, and if not, were already fully occupied. They had no choice but to go for the first room, ignoring the rumors of a haunted place. They had wanted to believe that maybe that particular room was not the one rumored to be haunted. So that morning, after the dark realization and after everything that had happened, the girls wanted to spend as little time as possible in the room. As soon as they were ready, they wasted no time in heading outdoors, where it was broad daylight. They made their way downstairs to the corner of the shop house for breakfast, where further discussion took place.
Should we move out?
Said one girl.
But where to?
The other one asked.
You know, we've made several calls before coming here, right? There was absolutely no other room that we could afford. If we spend more for tonight's stay in another place, some of us won't have enough to eat by the end of the month.
So I guess we'll just need to put up with one more night and hope the best for tonight then.
She replied, sounding defeated.
Maybe we should all sleep closer with each other tonight with the lights on. At least if anything happened to one of us, the rest of us would immediately know.
Another one added to the conversation. Everyone agreed. By then, there was nothing much that the girls could do. They avoided mentioning what they had experienced to the owners too, because there was no way of proving what had happened. Not long after, they went about their plan, exploring the new town, and just for a brief moment, they had forgotten about what had just happened last night. When it was time to head back to the room in the evening, however, they dreaded the walk back home. Although it was a bustling area near the bus terminal, who would have thought that above one of the shop houses, there lies a dark place where the spirit of the dead appears at night to let people know that they never really left. Or were they there because they have failed to realize that they have ceased to exist? When the night came, the girls left the lights on, and even so, the room itself was still quite dim. They had arranged their mattresses in a row like last night, but this time, much closer to each other. Their plan was to sleep back to back in the hopes that nothing weird would happen. If they could get through tonight, like last night, without waking up before the sunrise, it would be the best case scenario for them. They spent most of the night chatting away, while watching the clock that was hanging on the wall, secretly counting the hours to fall asleep. No one knew who the first to sleep was or who the last one was. Everything just went quiet after a while, and everyone had dozed off at some point during the night. Until all of a sudden, there was a knock on the door. Just a soft one. So only one of the girls, who was a light sleeper, had noticed. At first, she was not sure if it was a knock on the door, or if it was just some noise from the old piping or ventilation running through the room. She was afraid of being fully conscious, for fear of having to see ghosts that might suddenly appear out of nowhere, or witnessing something paranormal happening, so she had instinctively tried closing her eyes in the hopes that she could fall back asleep. Just when she felt like she was about to doze off again, another soft knock could be heard. And this time, it was followed by what sounded like someone dragging something on the outside of the room. Or maybe even from the ground floor where the flour mill was. She looked at the clock briefly, just to make sure it was not already time when they would start the flour milling operation for the day, but had immediately regretted her action. It was 3 a.m. As Catholics, they believed that it was a witching hour, the time when demons would come out as a way to mock the death of Jesus at 3 p.m. She was paralyzed with fear and could only close her eyes, trying not to move a single muscle. As she was closest to the door with her back facing the rest of the girls, she could not see them. While contemplating whether to wake the rest of the girls up, or at least the one beside her, suddenly, she felt a slight pull on her blanket. She had instantly felt a wave of relief when she saw that one of the girls was now sitting down on the mattress. But it was not for long, because it took her less than a second to realize that her friend was not awake. Just as they had imagined themselves sleepwalking last night, now, she was witnessing everything with her own eyes. Many years later, when she recalled the incident, she had no idea how she had managed to remain so calm at that moment. But that was what she did. She observed her friend walking towards the window while mumbling something unintelligible at the same time. She stood for a few seconds in front of the window, facing the pitch-black forest, and after that, turned and made her way towards the entrance door. She stood there and again mumbled something unintelligible before reaching for the switch to turn the lights off. Now lying in the dark, she could only hear her friend walking around the room, before eventually returning to her mattress, and went back to sleep. After that, everything was silent. She could feel her knees shaking and cold sweat forming on her palms. Just when she thought that everything was over, she heard a scratch on the door. And again, just as before, the sound of something being dragged outside of the room. Amid her fear, she had prayed for the sound to come from one of the workers dragging the bag of corn for the milling process to begin that day. It was not rare for businesses to start their operation at the wee hours of the morning. With that thought in mind, she had somewhat convinced herself that that was what was going on behind the closed door. The next morning, the first girl to wake up had also decided to wake the rest of the girls up, in a state of panic, as she had realized that it was already past 9 a.m. The girls were accustomed to waking up at 7 a.m., as they had also done so the previous day. Everyone was unusually quiet that morning, somewhat feeling lethargic. And out of the 5 girls, only one knew exactly why she had felt that way. She had decided to keep everything to herself, and only to tell her friends everything she had witnessed, as soon as they check out of the room. After cleaning up and packing, they made their way down to hand over the keys and made the final payment to the middle-aged couple who owned the place. She could feel a tight knot at the pit of her stomach when she realized how quiet it was at the flour mill downstairs.
Is the business not operating today?
No, we're closed every first Sunday of the month for maintenance, and that's today. And the maintenance guy will only come in the afternoon. So the missus and I will have some breakfast at the corner. If you ladies are not in a rush, feel free to join us.
Reading each other's minds, the girls had all agreed to the offer. They had finally found an opportunity to ask if the rumor of the haunted room was true, because what could be better than to sleep it in during breakfast in a group when people's guards are down?
So do you usually get a lot of renters for the room?
I would say not really, unless there is a group of people. Usually, students coming from out of town for the teacher training college, like all of you. Most places don't accommodate more than 3 people per room. But since we have a big one above the shop house, we decided to convert it into a place where students can stay for a couple of nights. You know, it used to be an office before. We had several bookkeepers upstairs, but we've since moved them to the office across the road.
Really? Why is that so?
You know, I inherited the place from my parents who had owned it before the Japanese occupation. I was still a young girl when the war had gone on. But I could remember the Japanese soldiers coming into our building one day. And by the time you know what was going on, they had taken over the place. Everyone knew what they were up to upstairs. People would be brought up for interrogation and some would never come out. On some days, there'd be multiple gunny sacks lining up the pavement, loaded onto the truck. They'd get the locals to drag the gunny sacks. We did not want to imagine who were inside. We don't know where they'd bring them.
Tears started welling up in her eyes as the missus told her story. The girls were surprised by how honest the couple had been when they had started to open up about the history of the place. They realized that for some, there were unhealed wounds from the past generation that had translated into grievances rather than a fear for the unseen. Apparently, one of the bookkeepers could see some lost spirits wandering even during the day, and that was why they had to move. The middle-aged couple, meanwhile, had wanted to keep the place and would invite a priest every year during All Souls' Day to say prayers for the souls who could not escape the place. After learning of the truth, there was no doubt in their minds that what one of them had heard and seen last night, to have witnessed one of their friends sleepwalking, were no mere coincidence. Everything was caused by the room that holds a tragic past, the souls trapped there, still unable to find peace. Thank you for watching. I will be updating weekly, so please subscribe to stay tuned.